Hello friends. In the previous few lectures, we've been considering different testing of materials. So one testing was largely employed or is largely employed to understand the mechanical behavior of the material or to identify the mechanical property of the material. In this testing, we impose a definite stretching load or a tensile load, and we study the behavior of the material in response to this tensile load. And based on the response of the material to this tensile load, we identify the behavior of the material, we plot the behavior of the material, and we identify the mechanical properties of the material. So when you want to understand the mechanical property of the material, you go for tensile testing. Now the other testing approaches, they are largely associated by or associated with the specific application. So when you employ a material to a specific application and you see that the mechanical condition experienced by the material is much different from that of the tensile loading, then whatever properties or the behavior that you have understood from the tensile testing of the material becomes rather restricted or confined. So therefore, in order to understand the behavior of the material in relation to the mechanical condition that it experiences in a given application, we devise corresponding testing techniques. And in the previous lecture, we saw one such testing technique which we refer to as the torsion testing. So we saw, as opposed to tensile testing wherein you will be imposing a tensile load, in torsion testing you will be imposing a load that is similar to that of the testing. And we saw how we can relate or what are the parameters that we have to introduce in order to translate the stress and strain that we observe in the tensile testing to have similar parameters in the torsion testing. We introduced new terms or new parameters like torsion moment and angular testing, and ultimately we were able to relate the angular testing to the shear strain which we are familiar with based on our understanding or the theoretical understanding of the mechanical behavior. Now, as opposed to these two techniques or two categories of techniques, so one which we use to understand the mechanical behavior in general, the other which is based on a specific application which we devise based on the specific application. So these categories of techniques, only one pertains to the first one. The only one that pertains to the first one is the tensile testing, while all the other testing techniques that we will look are confined, or rather they can be categorized into the second one wherein the tests are being devised to relate to a specific application. So in this towards the end of the previous lecture, we saw that at high temperatures there is a specific behavior that is exhibited by the material, and in order to study this specific behavior, we devised a testing called as creep testing. So in this lecture, we will spend some time discussing on how we can study the high temperature behavior of the material. So what essentially happens is, when you employ a material for an high temperature application, we saw the high temperature, the definition of the high temperature is dependent on the melting point of the material. So if you have a melting point, or if you have a material, it definitely has a melting point, and this material if it is operating at a temperature that is close to its melting point when compared to the ambient temperature, then we refer to that material as the high temperature material. So in that case, what happens is that for a given mechanical condition, for a static mechanical condition, when you impose a definite stress to the material at high temperature, you are not increasing the stress, you are imposing a definite stress to the material at high temperature, but as the time progresses, the material begins to deform. And this time dependent deformation of the material that occurs at the high temperature is what we refer to as creep. So creep is not the high temperature deformation of the material, but creep is a time dependent deformation of the material. Now the reason creep is associated with high temperature is because this time dependent deformation is not that dominant at ambient temperature. So if you impose a material or you impose a stress to the material at beyond its elastic limit, there will be a definite plastic deformation exhibited by the material, and when this plastic or when this material or when this load is imposed at the room temperature or ambient temperature, this amount of plastic deformation, it remains constant. So what I mean by that is, so if you could recollect, a regular stress strain curve will be of this form, and now you are imposing a stress of this value, and there is a related amount of strain associated with it. So sigma 1 and epsilon 1. Now at ambient temperature, when you leave this stress as it is, you keep on imposing this particular stress, and you see how this particular strain changes with time. You just keep on imposing the stress, and you are just looking at it and looking at the sample and want to see if there is any change in the strain exhibited by the material. You are not changing the stress, you are just applying a constant stress, and you are wanted to observe if with time does the strain change. And you observe that at room temperature there is not much change in the strain. And now when you increase the temperature, you observe that as the time increases, the strain associated with the material increases. And this is what we refer to as the creep. So time dependent creep, or time dependent change, or change in the dimension of the material, or time dependent strain of the material for a given stress condition is what we refer to as creep. And this creep is not dominant at the ambient temperature, but it is exceedingly dominant at high temperature, and that is the reason why we want to study the creep behavior. Or when we talk about, or when you want to employ a particular material to an high temperature application, we want to study the creep behavior of the material. In high temperature application, you use a component wherein it experiences a constant stress, but because of the time, as the time in which the material is used increases, the strain associated with it increases. And therefore, in order to understand the high temperature behavior of the material in that particular application, wherein the stress is constant and only thing that is varying is the time, and with the time the strain varies, we go for creep testing. So creep testing is not a high temperature testing, it is a testing that involves a time dependent change in the strain of the material. This is something for us to understand. Now, since creep is nothing but a time dependent, or it's a study, or it's a behavior of the material which is time dependent for a given stress, the way we devise the creep testing machine reflects this particular definition. Again, since creep is nothing but time dependent change in the material for a given mechanical condition, for a definite constant stress condition, the way the test is devised reflects this particular practical condition or this particular application, wherein the stress remains constant and only variable that changes is the time. We just allow the material to be in that stress condition for a longer period of time, and just we observe how much of the strain the material exhibits. So therefore, the variable here is during creep testing is strain and time. And what are the constant parameters? These are the stress and the temperature. So in accordance with the creep definition, what we are varying is we are allowing the material to stay in the stress condition for a prolonged period of time. So we are just varying the time. On the other hand, the stress that we impose, the mechanical condition that we impose remains constant. And with respect to time, what we are studying is how much the material is deforming. So therefore, the variable here is the time, and with respect to time, we are studying the change in the strain or the deformation of the material. And while the other constants are the stress and the temperature. Given this nature of the creep testing, the way we present the outcome of the creep testing is in this manner, wherein instead of stress and strain, because in case of tensile testing, we increase the stress and we calculate the strain. Therefore, you have two variables that is stress and strain. However, in case of creep testing, the time is one of the variable and the strain is the other variable. So we are essentially studying how strain changes as the time increases for a given. So these two are the constant, or two constants that we maintain during the creep testing. So for metals and alloys, there is a definite behavior exhibited by these materials. So when you do a creep testing, for metals and alloys, there is a definite behavior exhibited by this material. So this gives us a representative curve one can expect when we do the creep testing of metals and alloys. So even though quantitatively each metal and alloy behaves differently for the combination of stress the combination of stress and temperature, when you have different combinations of stress and temperature, quantitatively each metal and alloys they behave differently. However, there is a similar trend observed when you consider a metal and an alloy. So this trend helps us to understand the creep behavior of the material. So let us see how this trend looks like. So in accordance with the definition of creep, we have two variables, that is the strain and the time, and the parameters that are constant are the stress and temperature. So during creep testing, stress and temperature are constant, and the strain and time is varying. Now the way this testing operates is that you impose a definite stress directly on the material. So it is not like tensile testing, you gradually increase the stress, but in case of creep testing, you directly impose the constant amount of stress. So therefore, suddenly when you impose a definite amount of stress, a constant amount of stress, what happens is that there is an instantaneous increase in strain. So there is, you immediately start imposing a definite amount of stress, and there is an instantaneous increase in strain. So that is what you see in the first stage of the creep behavior. You begin by imposing a definite amount of stress, and there is a sudden increase in the strain. So that is represented by a straight line here. So what this means, the line here means that there is a sudden increase in the strain of the material, because you are not gradually increasing the stress. In creep testing, you are directly imposing or directly applying a definite amount of stress. And following this straight line, there is a curve that is observed, wherein the rate of the strain gradually decreases. So you have a straight line wherein which corresponds to a certain increase in the dimension of the material, because you have suddenly imposed a definite stress, and after this stage there is a gradual decrease in the stress. And following this stage of gradual decrease in the strain. So the first stage there is a sudden increase in the strain, and second stage there is a gradual decrease in the strain. So just by seeing the nature of the curves, we are now able to say first stage and second stage. So this is something that is really important when you are talking about the creep behavior. So we have a first stage wherein there is an instantaneous increase in the strain, and the second stage wherein there is a gradual increase in the strain. Now following this gradual increase in the strain, there is a stage wherein there is only a minimal increase in the strain, a very minimal increase in the strain, and finally you have a stage wherein there is a sudden increase in the strain and ultimately the failure of the material. So what we essentially see is, when you impose a constant load or constant stress to a material, then what essentially happens is you begin by imposing a definite constant stress to the material, and there is a sudden increase in the strain. And once you experience a sudden increase in the strain, the stage that follows, or as the time increases, the rate at which the strain increases gradually begins to decrease. So the strain with time gradually begins to decrease. At the initial stage, there is a sudden increase in strain, and after certain time, for instance, after this time period here, the amount of strain, it gradually begins to decrease as the time progresses. And after certain point here, the amount of strain is rather minimal. Only a marginal amount of strain is exhibited as the time increases. And after this period of marginal increase in strain, there is a sudden increase in strain with the time, and ultimately the failure of the material. So depending on how the strain varies with respect to time, we can categorize the overall creep behavior into different stages. So the first stage is referred to as the instantaneous creep, because this strain occurs instantaneously. The moment you apply the load, this occurs instantaneously. We refer to that as the instantaneous creep. So here you have the combination of elastic plastic deformation. Now, after this instantaneous creep, you have a stage wherein the strain with respect to time is not increasing instantaneously but gradually decreasing. So you can say, so this you have here is the strain and you have here the time. So one can say the slope of this curve is gradually decreasing, meaning the rate at which the strain occurs in this stage is gradually decreasing. So this stage is referred to as the decelerating creep stage. So you have an instantaneous creep stage, you have a decelerating creep stage, because at this stage the rate at which the strain occurs, the amount of strain that is exhibited by the material for a given amount of time gradually decreases, and therefore we refer to this as the decelerating creep stage. And now in this stage here, the strain is largely minimal. There is a certain amount of strain, but the strain is largely minimal. It is not possible for us to measure the amount of strain. It is very small as the time increases, and this we refer to as the steady state creep. So this here is the instantaneous creep, and here we have decelerating creep, and here we have the steady state creep. Now, how were we able to distinguish these different stages? Just by looking at the behavior of the material, of the creep behavior of the material. Just by considering the strain versus time plot, we saw that there are different stages, because with respect to time, the amount of strain exhibited by the material varies. Or to put it in terms of the slope, the strain rate varied as the time increased. So when the strain rate was more or less constant, we have instantaneous creep. When the strain rate was decreasing, we have decelerating creep. When there was not much change in the strain rate, so the material, it exhibited just a minimal amount of strain during a prolonged period of time, we refer to that as the steady state condition. And finally, we have the accelerating creep. So this accelerating creep is when you have an exceeding amount of strain and the material ultimately fails. For all practical purposes, we distinguish the creep behavior into these different stages. So you have instantaneous, decelerating, steady state creep, and finally the accelerating creep. Now, for practical purposes, these two stages, that is instantaneous and decelerating, are categorized into stage 1. The steady state is categorized into stage 2, and the accelerating is categorized into stage 3. So the combination of instantaneous and the decelerating creep, it is categorized as stage 1, steady state as stage 2, and ternary as stage 3. The reason it is categorized in this manner is because when you consider the overall time taken for the creep test, the time taken for the instantaneous creep is very much smaller. Like I said, as the name itself suggests, the instantaneous creep occurs at the very moment when you start imposing the load. So therefore, the instantaneous creep is rather confined to a very small duration of time. And to compare to the overall duration of the creep testing, which includes a prolonged period of time wherein the material spends its time with minimal strain, this steady state condition is the prolonged period of time. When you compare the time taken for the instantaneous time to the steady state condition, the time taken for under the steady state condition, the time during which the material spends under the steady state condition, the instantaneous time is very small, and therefore these two are combined into stage 1, and the stage 2 is where the minimal strain is exhibited by the material, and that is we refer to as the steady state condition or steady state creep. And finally you have the tertiary creep, wherein the strain with respect to time accelerate at a very high rate. Now when you consider this representation or this behavior of the metals and alloys, this creep behavior of the metals and alloys, it is important to note that during the creep behavior, the material spends most of its time in the steady state condition. So therefore, when it is possible for us to increase the time spent by the material during the steady state condition, we can enhance the life of the material or high temperature life of the material. So when you consider the overall creep behavior of the material or time consumed by each of these stages, the steady state condition or steady state creep consumes the maximum amount of time. So therefore, if you ensure that the material spends most of its time in the steady state condition, we can ensure that the high temperature life of the material is enhanced. So in order to work or in order to understand the life of the material, or creep behavior based on the life of the material. If you want to understand the high temperature behavior of the material based on its lifetime, then the stage that you need to focus is the steady state stage. So the steady state stage needs to be focused when you want to study the life of the material, because for a given stress and temperature, the material spends most of its time in the steady state condition, and therefore if your focus is on understanding the high temperature life of the material, then you have to focus on the steady state condition or steady state creep. Now, instead of the life of the material, if you are interested in understanding the strain exhibited by the material at high temperature, then your focus should be on the stage 1, that is instantaneous creep, and the transient or the decelerating creep. This decelerating creep is also referred to as the transient creep because it acts as a bridge between the instantaneous and the steady state creep, so it is also referred to as the transient creep. So when your focus is on to understand the strain exhibited by the material at high temperature, since the strain, this amount of strain is largely introduced by the combination of instantaneous and the decelerating creep, so stage 1 will be your focus. So at high temperature behavior, you want to understand the high temperature behavior. If your focus is on life, you will focus or you will study the steady state condition of the material. You will study the steady state behavior of the material, or what are the factors that governs the steady state behavior of the material or steady state creep of the material. Now, if your focus is to understand the high temperature strain of the material, then you will study your study on stage 1, wherein you have instantaneous and transient creep behavior. Now, the metallurgical factors that underpin these different stages are, in these stages you have a regular plastic strain. So in these stages you have, so if you could recollect, the plastic strain is introduced by the combination of two factors, that is increase in the dislocation density and the increase in the average distance covered by the dislocation. So in these stages the regular plastic deformation is observed, and therefore there is an increase in the dislocation density and the distance covered by the dislocation. However, the reason the creep here is decelerating, the strain here is decelerating, because it is happening at a constant stress, and at a constant stress, as the dislocation density increases, you need to have an increase in the stress for the increase in the average distance covered by the dislocation. So let me repeat, you are operating at a constant stress condition. For a given constant stress, you have a definite amount of dislocation densities. So when you have an increased amount of dislocation densities that corresponds to this constant stress, these dislocation densities, they interact and reduce the average distance. So therefore, the overall plastic deformation is reduced, and therefore you see with time the creep or the strain, it gradually decreases. So the reason for this decrease is because as time increases, there is an increase in the interaction of the dislocations, and therefore what happens is that you need to have, in an ideal case, you need to increase the stress in order to have a further plastic deformation, and since in the creep testing your stress is constant, the amount of strain is gradually decreasing with strain, and this can be related to that of the strain hardening, because we observe the same principle in the strain hardening. The reason we need to have an increased stress to add to the existing amount of plastic deformation is because of this reason, and because of the strain hardening, you have the decelerating creep. Now, this decelerating creep, the stage following the decelerating creep, you have a minimal amount of the plastic deformation. This is there because what essentially happens is you significantly reduce the dislocation density during the steady state condition. So we saw the plastic deformation is the combination of the dislocation density and the average distance covered by the dislocation. Now if you want to reduce the plastic deformation, if you want to ensure that there is not much plastic deformation, either you can reduce the average distance or the number of dislocation density. So here we have minimal plastic deformation because we are significantly reducing the number of dislocation. The way it is being reduced is by increasing the mobility of the dislocation. At high temperature, you give some thermal energy to the dislocation, you increase its mobility. And because of the increase in mobility, the interaction between the dislocation increases, and when the interaction increases, the possibility of annihilation, it increases. So because you have the possibility of annihilation, and in addition to the annihilation, since we are talking about the high temperature condition, the dislocations are allowed to climb. If you could recollect, we considered the moment of the dislocation, and the other moment, the non-conservative moment, is the climb, and the dislocations are allowed to climb, and they rearrange to form the subboundaries. So the dislocation annihilate at high temperature, the dislocation rearrange to form the subboundaries. So therefore, the overall number density or the density of the dislocation, it decreases, and therefore the deformation is rather minimal. So therefore, here, if you want to talk about, or if you want to relate what happens in the steady state condition to a generalized behavior, what happens here is recovery. So in case of the transient creep or the decelerating creep, you have a dominant strain hardening. In case of the steady state condition, you have a balance between strain hardening and recovery. So whatever dislocation the stress introduces, the temperature, because of the temperature, the annihilation and the rearrangement reduces this dislocation density. Therefore, the plastic deformation is minimal. So for a given stress, because of the strain hardening, the creep rate gradually decreases in the decelerating creep. The strain gradually decreases in the decelerating creep with time. However, in the steady state condition, there is a combination of strain hardening and recovery. So what recovery does is annihilates the dislocation, it rearranges the dislocation. It rearranges the dislocation to form subboundaries. So therefore, the number of dislocation density, it decreases, and therefore the plastic deformation is maintained. So you have the contribution of the stress that wants to increase your plastic deformation. However, we now have the influence of the temperature that annihilates and rearranges the dislocation. So there is a balance, and that's the reason why you have this steady state condition. So here the strain hardening is dominant, and therefore you have a decelerating creep. Here there is a balance between strain hardening and the recovery. So there is, you have a minimal plastic deformation during the steady state condition. So these are certain generalized concepts that one can understand from the creep testing of the material. So the takeaway point is, creep testing is not high temperature testing. Creep testing is to understand the high temperature behavior, and at high temperature, since with time and for a constant flow the strain varies, we devise such a testing condition. And for metals and alloys, there is a definite pattern that is being followed. There is a definite trend, and that allows us to categorize the overall creep behavior into stage 1, 2 and 3. And depending on your focus, if you want to focus on the life of the material, high temperature life of the material, you have to study the steady state behavior of the material or steady state creep of the material. If your focus is on the strain exhibited by the material at high temperature, then you have to study the stage 1 of creep of the material. Now, as opposed to the high temperature application, you are employing a material at an ambient temperature. So the mechanical or the stress that the material is exposed to at the ambient temperature is much less than that of the ultimate tensile strength. By now, we know what an ultimate tensile strength is. So it is beyond the ultimate tensile strength. There is going to be a geometrical change. So you are employing a material in a particular application, and you observe that the tensile testing, or rather the stress experienced by the material at that kind of application, is much lower than the ultimate tensile strength of the material. So ultimate tensile strength of the material is a mechanical property, and in application you are using that material in an application wherein the stress experienced by the material is much lower than that. However, despite the significant difference in the ultimate tensile strength and the stress experienced by the material in that application, the material fails catastrophically rather. So the material, without showing any plastic deformation, it fails abruptly. And when you look into the application, you observe that the mechanical condition experienced by the material is not static but dynamic. And this is the reason why, despite the stress experienced by the material being much lower than the ultimate tensile strength, the material has failed. And therefore, you devise a test that reflects that particular condition that corresponds to the application. So let me repeat, you use a material and with a very high ultimate tensile strength into an application wherein the tensile strength exhibited by is pretty low. But Despite this difference in the UTS value and the stress exhibited by the material in the application, the material fails rather catastrophically. Without any plastic deformation, the material fails. And when you look closely, you observe that the stress condition, the mechanical condition experienced by the material is not static, but it is dynamic. It varies with time. In case of creep, the strain varied with time. Here, what happens is the mechanical condition experienced by the material varies with time. So therefore, you devise a test that reflects this particular application. So for that, you introduce a mechanical condition that is dynamic. So when compared to creep, wherein you have a constant mechanical condition, now in this test, you have a mechanical condition that is dynamic, meaning the stress, it changes with time. And secondly, what you are measuring now is not the properties, what is the yield strength, or not those properties. You are measuring the time taken for failure. So you devise a test that will reflect a practical condition wherein the material is not experiencing a constant stress but a varying stress, and now you don't want to study the yield strength or the strain of the material, but the time taken for the material to fail. And this test is what we refer to as the fatigue test. So what fatigue test characterizes is the mechanical condition you impose is not static. It varies with time. And similarly, what you are interested is not in the strain, but the time taken for the material to fail. So the fatigue test, it characterized by the dynamic mechanical condition, and you want to study the time taken for the failure. So when you want to see, or when you want to impose a stress that varies with time, there are numerous ways of doing it, and the simplest way is assigning a stress that is similar to that of a sine curve. So when we talk about a stress that is varying with time, what we are essentially talking about is a combination of stresses. So one of the simplest consideration that you can, or simplest condition that you can impose, is the combination of equal amount of compression and tensile test. So you can, equal amount of compression and the tensile stress can be imposed to the material to bring about this dynamic loading condition that the material experiences in the application. So the mechanical condition that is imposed or that characterizes the fatigue testing, which is dynamic, is the cyclic stress. So we saw, because in the application the material does not experience a constant loading condition, it experiences a loading condition that varies with time. For the for our test purposes, we can impose a similar dynamic condition, a dynamic stress condition which varies with time. The simplest way of doing it is considering a stress cycle. So cyclic stress, or considering a stress cycle. So we can manipulate the stress cycle in such a way that we are able to impose a mechanical condition that is similar to that of the application. So what a stress cycle means is, a simplest example is something like this, wherein this is 0 and this is a tensile stress, and this is in the negative region is the compressive stress. So you have a periodic combination of tensile and a compressive stress, and this we refer to as the reversed stress cycle. So in order to impose a dynamic mechanical condition that varies with time, one of the simplest way of doing it is the combination of tensile and compression stress, and this is cyclic in nature, it is periodic, and this is referred to as the reversed stress cycle. So the mechanical condition that you impose needs to be dynamic, and the simplest condition is the reversed stress cycle, wherein you have the combination of tensile, equal magnitude of tensile and compressive loading. Now it is also possible for us to just consider varying degrees of tensile loading or varying degrees of compressive loading. So such are referred to as the repeated stress cycles. So you have reversed stress cycles, you have repeated stress cycles. In order to incorporate the mechanical condition that is similar to the application, wherein the stress condition is not constant, it is dynamic, the simplest way of doing it in the test condition is having such setups, such stress cycles. So one of the stress cycle is reversed, you have combination of compression and tension. The other stress cycle is repeated, wherein you just have varying degrees of tensions and also possibly varying degrees of compression. Finally, it is also possible to have an irregular stress cycle. So you have irregular repeated and reversed form of stress cycles. So the dynamic stress condition that characterizes the fatigue testing, which we are focusing on now. Now these can be, or this dynamic stress condition are introduced in the form of stress cycles. So these stress cycles can be of three categories. So one is the repeated stress cycle. So it can largely be tensile, or it can be largely be compressive. The other is the reversed one, wherein there is a combination of tension and compression stresses. And finally, you have irregular or random stress cycle, wherein you don't have a definite stress, or wherein you don't have a regularity as you would see in the repeated or reversed condition. Now, despite these differences in the stress cycle, one can identify two definite parameters. Even though the trends of these different stress cycles vary largely, one can identify different definite points in these stress cycles. So one point is the maximum stress, the other is the minimum stress. So irrespective of the nature of the stress cycle you introduce in your fatigue testing, it is possible for us to identify two spots, that is the maximum stress and the minimum stress. So based on the relation between the maximum and the minimum stress, one can quantify or one can describe the different stress cycles. For instance, we can talk about a stress range, which is nothing but the difference between the maximum stress and the minimum stress. So for any given cycle, since there is a maximum point and the minimum point, you can talk about stress range, which is nothing but the difference between maximum stress and the minimum stress. And similarly, we can talk about the mean stress. As the name suggests, is this the mean between the maximum and the minimum stress. And finally, we have also the alternating stress, which is expressed as this. Now, in case of the mean stress, as the name indicates, this is the average of the maximum and the minimum stress. However, the alternating stress, it talks about amount of deviation from the mean stress. So how much we deviate when we consider the different stress, maximum or minimum, how much we deviate from this mean stress is what is being calculated by the alternating stress. And finally, we have a stress ratio, which is the ratio of the minimum stress to that of the maximum stress. So using all these parameters here, one can quantitatively describe the stress cycle that is being introduced for fatigue testing. So for fatigue testing, you need a dynamically changing stress condition, and this can be introduced by stress cycles. So there are three different forms of stress cycles. There are random, repeated and reversed. But despite their differences in their nature, you have a specific points, that is maximum stress and the minimum stress. And depending on how you relate this maximum stress and minimum stress, you can calculate different parameters to characterize these stress cycles. You have a stress range, you have mean stress, you have alternating stress, and finally you have stress ratio. So this is stress ratio. So using these terms, one can characterize or quantify the stress condition that is being introduced in the fatigue test. Finally, what we want to do is we want to represent the outcomes of this fatigue test. So if you could recollect, just moments before we started, our intention was to understand the lifetime of the material for a given dynamic stress condition. So we have a mechanical condition that is dynamic, and for this dynamic stress condition we want to understand the life of the material. So what the variables that we have when we represent the fatigue test would then be the stress that you impose and the number of cycles the material spins without failing. So what we mean by cycle is these are periodic in nature. So therefore we can calculate we can express the time in terms of the number of cycles. So what we essentially want to know is, for a given stress condition, given a dynamic stress condition, how much time will the material survive? That is our ultimate goal. We want to see how long will the material survive for this dynamic stress condition. Now instead of talking in terms of time, we can translate the time into the number of cycles of the number of stress cycles rather, meaning because the different stress cycles that we have considered are periodic in nature. Therefore, the time can be translated to number of cycles. So, in this case of the reversed stress cycle, what we have shown is just one cycle. So, the time taken for this one cycle, or the time taken for this one stress cycle can be used to calculate the time spent by the material for a given mechanical condition. So, therefore, the results that we are interested in, that is the time spent by the material, the time the material is able to survive for a given dynamic condition, is translated to the number of cycles and with respect to the stress that you impose, the stress condition that you impose. So S here is the stress condition that you impose. Of course, this is a dynamic stress. So therefore, when you want to express the dynamic stress, you either consider the mean stress or the alternating stress or maximum or minimum stress, because in case of, unlike the creep testing, what you have in fatigue testing is a dynamic stress. So you need to have an appropriate stress that is involved in the representation. So you can either consider the mean stress or alternating stress or maximum or minimum stress. So whenever you see a SN curve, this is referred to as the SN curve. So this SN curve, it relates the stress, the dynamic stress experienced by the material and how much time the material will survive the given dynamic stress. And whenever you see an SN curve, you need to understand what is the S that is considered, because we have, since the mechanical condition that we impose is a dynamic one, we have different stresses or ways of categorizing this mechanical condition. We have mean, alternating, maximum, minimum, and all the other things. So when you are considering such an SN curve, it is important for you to understand what does the S denote. And now the N is the number of cycle the material is able to survive for a given stress. If you consider this relation between the stress and the number of cycle, and it is possible for you to imagine that as the stress increases, the number of time or the time of the lifespan of the material, as the stress increases, it decreases. So therefore, as you increase the stress rather, the lifespan of the material decreases, or the number of stress cycle the material is able to accept, or the number of stress cycle that the material is able to survive, it decreases. So therefore, as the stress increases, the number of stress cycle it decreases, the number of cycle it decreases. So therefore, you have a relation, an inverse relation, something like this. So meaning, when you increase, for instance, the mean stress of your testing, and you compare it with the number of stress cycles the material survives. So with increase, you observe that with increase in the mean stress, the number of cycles the material survives, it decreases, and therefore you observe an inverse relation. This characteristic, this is just a relation between the time spent by the material or the lifespan of the material for a given stress. So this stress again is a dynamic stress which is characterized by a specific value. So this stress is not a constant one, it's a dynamic stress that is characterized by a specific value. Now, in some metals or alloys, it is possible that beyond certain limit, below certain stress, the material is able to survive indefinite or infinite steps, infinite cycles. Let me repeat. Beyond or below a certain stress value, below a certain mechanical condition that is characterized by either mean stress or alternating stress, below certain value, the material is able to survive infinite cycles. So meaning, there is only certain amount of time we can spend on a testing machine. And if you observe that for instance, you are spending 2 weeks and the material has not failed, and for all practical purposes, you refer to that as the infinite time. So there is a certain limit of stress below which the material is able to survive infinite. So this infinite again is a relative term. So it is able to survive infinite amount of stress cycles. So that particular term we refer to as the fatigue limit. So there are specific metals and alloys and also some materials which is able to survive an infinite numbers of cycle below a certain limit of stress, and this stress is referred to as the fatigue limit. So this material A here doesn't show any fatigue limit, because with a decrease in the stress, there is a definite number of cycles after which the material fails. However, when you have a fatigue limit, the ascent curve will look in this manner. There will be a straight line beyond certain point. This is a straight line, or assume it to be a straight line, and this point is what we refer to as the fatigue limit. So the material here it does not show any fatigue limit, whereas the material B here it shows a fatigue limit. Below the stress SF, below this fatigue limit, the material is able to withstand any amount of stress below, or the stress below this limit, for an infinite number of cycles. Again, this infinite term is a relative one. It all depends on your laboratory conditions. So therefore, when you see a difference in the curves, in the ascent curves, and when you see there is a straight line in the ascent curve, what it indicates is a fatigue limit. Now, considering that there is an inverse relation between the stress, the S and the N. So S here is again the stress, and it is just a generic term here. It's just a generic way of representing. Generally, S here can be equivalent to that of the mean or alternative, or even minimal or maximum amount of stress. So since there is an inverse relation, you can arrive at an expression for it, meaning you can have, say for instance, you are considering mean stress, and it is possible for us to relate it to the number of, for a given mean stress, the number of cycles the material survives. And since what we have is an inverse relation, experimentally people have been able to arrive at an expression for it. People have been able to fit this particular curve that you see. People have been able to arrive at an expression for the curve that you see, wherein as the stress increases, the number of cycles experienced by the material decreases. And this expression is called as Boskin's expression, wherein the stress, so this could be mean stress, any stress, is related to the number of cycle to that of a constant. So since what you have is an inverse relation, when you bring this here, all that is left on the right hand side is a proportionality constant, and therefore to be accurate, there is an exponential term added here. So this exponential term can be 1 or slightly different than that of 1. To be more precise, you can fit the curve using this exponential term as well. So in order to have an accurate fitting or an accurate expression for this curve here, you have this exponential term, and of course it is possible for this exponential term to be 1. So this expression that relates the stress or the influence of stress on the number of cycles that a material can withstand is, or first it was postulated by Boskin, and that's what we have this, we refer to this as the Boskin's expression. So in this lecture we consider two different testing methods. One is the creep testing, that is for high temperature materials. The reason it is considers or it is used for understanding the high temperature behavior of the material is because at high temperature, for a given stress, with time the strain varies, and since the time dependent behavior of the material for a constant mechanical condition is referred to as the creep, we consider the creep behavior of the material at high temperature. The creep behavior, that is the time dependent strain of the material for a given mechanical condition, for a constant mechanical condition, it is more pronounced, it is more dominant at high temperature, and that is the reason why we study the creep behavior for high temperature material. The creep as it is, it implicitly per se, it does not have anything to do with the high temperature. Because at high temperature the time dependent strain becomes dominant, we use creep behaviors to study the high temperature materials. Secondly, in case of fatigue testing, the reason we are interested in fatigue testing is because it is instantaneous. You don't get any warning in the form of strain. So what essentially happens is that the material fails immediately, and the characterizing feature here in case of the fatigue testing is we see, or the mechanical condition that we impose is dynamic in nature. So with this we will wind up this lecture, and we will continue with the discussion in the next one. Goodbye.